Downer is very proud to bring this podcast series to you. At Downer, our purpose is to provide the vital services that connect communities and enable them to thrive. We do this by assembling the best minds, harnessing the power of technology and our enduring relationships to deliver sustainable outcomes for all.
My name is Jo Taranto and I'm joined today by Gerhard Loots, the CEO of Kallipr. And today we're talking about future-proofing water utilities with digitisation. Thanks for joining me.
Well, thanks, Jo. It's great to be here.
Can you tell me what future-proofing means for water utilities?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of advances in technology that allows us to do things in a better way today, and it's natural progression for us. And ultimately, when we start thinking about water as a scarce resource, climate change playing a role. The infrastructure that supports that, if we can get 2% more out of it, it's quite valuable. So from our perspective, a lot of progressive water utilities, and Australia is actually, we do a lot of work globally. Australia is actually amongst some of the most progressive in the world from our perspective, are employing technology to make better decisions and make the infrastructure last a bit longer. And that, I think that's the first part on the actual infrastructure. And the second part where we play a role is, well, how do we deal with this data? How do we ensure that the data that we're generating doesn't become a problem in itself? Because it can get overwhelming. And finding the right tactics to deploy that correctly.
You use lots of different technologies and you like to keep it simple, which I love. Can you tell me about some of the technology you use?
So I think the first big change that has happened is networks have become really low power orientated, which enables us to do things today at a different price point. We could always do them before, but the price points were significantly different. So if you think of 3G, for example, we don't need any more bandwidth than what you can get on 3G, but it was very power hungry. So the first technology that you would hear is a LTE technology, which is standard mobile networks, which is Cat-M and NB-IoT. That's sort of in the category of licensed networking. Then you get unlicensed network spectrum, which is very similar to Wi-Fi. You can use it without a license. And there's a couple of technologies there like LoRa, and then we've got satellite and so forth that we also use. And then I think sort of once you've got the connection between the thing and the internet, essentially where we're trying to achieve things, there's quite a bit happening in localised processing power, which enables us to do things a bit differently and again at different price points than previously before.
You explain a lot of the work you do as collecting a lot of data, and as you said, that can be its own problem. How do water utilities particularly integrate all of that information, and how can you help?
Well, it's very difficult. I think that's the starting point. It's but I think there's also other industries that has been on this journey for quite a while. If you think of road infrastructure, for example, we've got Google Maps that today is a digital version of what the actual road systems look like. We don't have that in water utilities. There might be a CAD drawing that indicates what the pipe looks like, but it's not an interactive and responsive structure that allows you to start automating things. So I think we usually advise our customers to spend a lot of time just on the data strategy itself, and to look at other industries that has done it well. I think the digitization of industry is not new. The airline industry have been using autopilot for a very long time. You don't really buy airline tickets anymore from the travel agent in paper form. It's now digital. Same with Netflix. But there's a reason why I think industries like the water industry and say rail, for example, where we also play quite a big role, is a bit more conservative. Because if you can't watch a funny cats video on YouTube, it's not really consequential, Whereas if you mess up the water supply into a city, it can be devastating.
So what are the benefits of having things like real-time data collection? Is it critical, or is it a nice to have these days?
Look, real-time has got a very technical definition to it. So let's just use near real-time, because it's got near real-time within a second of something happening. Real-time, I think it's 32 times per second or something is the definition. But essentially, if you think if you think of a very large water utility like Sydney Water, they the Southern Hemisphere's largest water utility, and their pipe network is 26,000 kilometers. Now, the data that they get over 26,000 kilometers, which is halfway around the Earth and then a bit more, is very limited. So the water industry has employed things like water sniffing dogs to detect leaks. Which it seems a bit agricultural when we've got we can put robots on Mars, but we've got to use a dog to find a leak. And I think that has not been possible because of power consumption reasons. The energy sector is a bit more advanced because they've got power where they need to measure. Whereas today the water industry is on that journey because we can actually use battery powered devices and so forth to get data off the actual infrastructure and to move forward from that.
What does it take for a water utility, to be adaptable for the future demands then, given there's so much data and also a lot of challenges in getting it?
Yeah, it's really interesting because when we deal with a number of utilities across the world, and they all have their own little problems. That's the biggest priority for them. So in New Zealand, for example, the water quality is relatively poor because of all the volcanic activity. So chlorine monitoring is a big thing for them. I think it's just if you take typical continuous improvement process methodologies, you start off by listing the things that will have the biggest impact and trading off the effort that it will take to have that impact, and coming up with a form of matrix that says, look, these are my 20 or 30 problems, but this number 3 or 4 might be the best bang for buck in terms of getting the journey started. I think that's probably one of the things that we see utilities not always doing well. Like some of the use cases are significantly more complex than some of the others, and some of them got pretty low return where others might have really high return. And I think sort of when you start changing something, you require continuous momentum, and part of that momentum is achieving success relative to the problem that you're solving, so that you retain the support of the organization to keep going forward. But I think it's beyond the point of do we do it. It's at a point where how do we do it and how do we manage it, and how do we get the best outcome? Because you just think of all the changes that we've had climate-wise, and you look at the consumption of water through even machines, right? There's an interesting story about ChatGPT uses for the average session, it uses half a liter of water, right? So what does that mean? How do we deal with that? How do we consume that correctly? So I don't think it's much of a choice anymore. It's more a matter of get started, but get started sensibly.
You're listening to the Australian Water Association podcast series, and I'm speaking with Gerhard Loots from Kallipr. How important is data security then to give a utility the confidence that they're doing the right thing and that they're not at risk as well?
It's of the utmost importance. I think there's levels of data security, there's system security. The last thing you want is if you put a bit of a black hat on, the last thing you want is to open doors for cyber attacks. If you could shut down the water supply into the city, it can be quite catastrophic. And I think so. You've got to be careful, and there's best practice involved at every step of the way. But I think it's just part of the risk of the life that we're living today, right? It's we've got to find a way to manage it, but avoiding it at all costs doesn't seem to be the answer either.
Are there any projects that you're really excited by?
Yeah, I think they all play a role, right? I mean, someone told me today that one of the councils over in New Zealand loses 48% of the water between the tap and the dam, right? Which is incredible if you think about it. You're consuming a litre of water, but I'm trying to do the reverse maths on the fly, but you've lost 960 mils of water before that actually gets produced. And so that as a starting point, if we can just manage the resource a bit better and more efficiently, that's exciting. We're also involved with a few water rejuvenation projects across the world where some of the, I'm just not at liberty to mention them, but some of the larger technology companies are actually putting funds aside to assist in areas where they're consuming large amount of water and putting it back into communities that simply doesn't have access to it, which I think if anyone's ever gone camping without water, that know how dreadful it gets when you can't actually just access something as basic as that. So I think there's sort of a lot of really good things on the side of it that has a good social outcome. But I think sort of more on the technology side, I think from our perspective, as we look at innovative ways to solve the problems, there's a massive spread. There's a spread from being able to ascertain how much wastewater might be getting into the ocean. That's a very tricky thing to do. Measuring chlorine consistently without having to clean the sensor the whole time is very difficult, because you've got to look at the particles and the particle analysis on the fly with no power, which is it's really not trivial. So solving those challenges are quite mentally stimulating. But at the same time, I think the beautiful thing about the water industry is just that it really just does good, isn't it? Like it's if you can conserve it, and look, people make mistakes. There's a lot of stuff happening in the UK at the moment with wastewater spillage, but I think it's one of those industries where people are really in for the right reasons, so they all count in our books. Is the answer that I'm trying to get to. Yeah.
A lot of problems you can potentially help solve.
Yeah. Well, it's fun. Kallipr as a name for us is. Kallipr is a measuring tool. It's a highly accurate measuring tool that you use in production, but that's really all that we are. We're a digital ruler that allows you to. We walk a path with our customers to understand their problem, and then to get the right measurement back so that better decisions can be made. So that's a part that we enjoy. Yeah.
How much is AI and machine learning helping you solve those problems?
It's on a multitude of levels. Yeah. So we're a full stack manufacturer even. So we do everything from producing sensors. We also use third-party sensors, but we manufacture them ourselves. To designing and manufacturing in Australia, actually. So we've got our own manufacturing line, and then on the software side, that's a whole new challenge in itself. But I think when you look at AI, even in the context of marketing, we use it quite extensively already. We use it extensively in answering RFPs and RFIs, and then we haven't even touched the technology that we're selling, right? So on our coding, we're already using AI-generated code. We use robotics to check whether or not there's security breaches on the code. So it's all consuming, and I think sort of that's one of the interesting changes that we're sitting with. Even if you look forward with our kids or our family or whatever, people that we love, what do they do in the future? Because knowledge base is going to be severely challenged. And I think it's both sort of peril and opportunity. But for us, I think in this space, if you look at the amount of data generated, it's massive. Like it's, Sydney Water, for example, we've got over 20,000 sensors with them. They look at, they take measurements every 15 minutes. So you're looking at 96 measurements. If you extrapolate that, over 365 days, it comes to like 350 million data points, which no human being can look at that. It's impossible. So you've got to find a way to deal with that data in a constructive manner that still delivers the outcome. So, but I think AI is going to be like computers. In the 80s, I would assume people were thinking, 2 or 3 people might use it in my organization, and the future job will just have AI. Even for podcast, frankly, there's a lot of really cool AI tools that one can use these days, right? So
our conferences are going to look very different, and our events and our teams. Looking ahead, what other emerging tech is exciting for you?
So networks have progressed, compute, cloud, everything has progressed. The thing that hasn't really progressed is sort of material science, which it's very, very difficult again. So batteries, for example, haven't progressed at the same rate as networks. So it's actually an Australian company that does graphene batteries, which is a new material. It shows a lot of promise. So it's far more stable, cheaper, everything. I think that's going to be interesting. And then look, I like robots, so I think the robotics has also increased, and I think that's where we're going to end up in this water space.
It's pretty fascinating stuff, and thank you for sharing your insights. I've been talking with Gerhard Loots, the CEO of Kallipr. Thanks for talking to me.
Well, thank you, and thanks for having us today on the podcast today.